Greetings, everyone. Instructor Jeremy Thomas here, Rogers May Athletic Association, and Six Methods Martial Arts and Swordsmanship Academy. And we're using some new audio equipment today, so we're going to stop right here and look at the opening and make sure that everything's working all right, and then we'll get into today's video. All right, thanks. So I had several topics on my mind about what I wanted to talk about in this next video, but the main thing I want to talk about, I think, today is comparing really the differences between a saber and a sword and the exceptions to the rules. Okay, there's always exceptions, especially in Chinese martial arts. So I'm going to start off with some models that everybody's familiar with, and then get into some less familiar stuff as we go on. Okay, so let's start off with what everybody's pretty familiar with, which is the oxtail saber, or the Chinese broadsword, as some people call it. The one with the wide profile that everybody is familiar with. Okay, let's look at that. So, myself personally, I was taught that the requisites for classification as a saber was a single sharpened edge and a curved profile blade. Single edge, curved profile, it's a saber. Okay, and that's generally true, but we'll circle back around to that statement because there are exceptions. Okay, so this is the one everybody is most familiar with, probably from Chinese martial arts. This is the oxtail dao, or Nue dao, and this particular model is the Hanwei practical kung fu broadsword model. Okay, which is really nice. It's very compact. It's short, thick, heavy, good, well balanced. The other model I have in my collection is the LK Chin Nue dao. Now, if we look at them together, we can see they're quite different. The LK Chin model is longer with two fullers instead of a single fuller. The cup guard, the Hushou, is bigger on the LK Chin model, and the handle's a little bit longer with a little more curvature and more oval, while the Hanwei model is a little bit more rounded. Okay, so you've definitely got the LK Chin is definitely a bigger saber, overall length, handle, and blade, whereas the Hanwei model is more compact, and they both have their strengths and weaknesses, and I like cutting with both of them. I don't think one's particularly better than the other. They do different cuts, so, some different cuts. Each model does better than the other, and vice versa. But they're different enough that it's kind of a different experience, cutting with them, rather than just cutting with something that feels exactly the same. Okay, so now we're going back a little bit farther to the Ming Qing dynasties. Okay, and we've got here a pair of LK Chin Yangling Dao goose quill sabers. You can see they have a much more compact profile. They have an elongated tip and point to drive through hard armor. Okay, the spines are very thick in the back. Okay, really a wedge, a very simple geometry, but very effective. Okay, this was a one-to-one recreation from a model from Mr. Peter Decker's collection, and they are extremely good cutters. Okay, these are the two that I use when I'm doing live weapons Shuang Dao practice. Okay, which I do slowly because I want to keep all my body parts. Okay, so these are the type of Dao that would have been used with a shield in a type of formation like the Mandarin Duck formation that General Qi Huigong used so famously. It would not have been probably an oxtail Dao like popular culture is so familiar with. So these go back a little bit further. They're a little bit more combat oriented as opposed to the Nue Dao, which were used by martial artists, but they were also used by street performers as well. All right, so we've defined what a saber is. We've got a definition of a saber: single edge, curved blade. So how do we classify a sword? Okay, another very popular and known Chinese sword type or actual that qualifies as an actual sword is the jian or gim in Cantonese. Okay, Southern styles call it gim, but generally it's jian, the Mandarin term. Okay, so this style is kind of more the closer to the modern style that the archetypical scholar warrior would have used. But people say that jian were ever used by the military, which is not true. They were. Sabers just tended to be more popular more frequently. So our definition of a sword is a straight profile, two sharp edges, and a thrusting point. Okay? So we've got two sharp edges here, which means we can't do things like wrap it around our bodies because there's no safe side. Okay? If I bring this into my waist, I'm going to cut myself. So you really have to operate with jian out in front of you, and very rarely are you going to bring it behind to make big cuts. Okay, you want little sniping cuts to the wrist and then go in for the big thrust, or at least that's my strategy. I'm not going to say that's the only way to do things, because it's not. So now we've kind of got our two definitions. Okay, we've got our classification of sabers, curved, single edge, the classification of swords, double edge, straight. With the sword, like with the sabers, we're going to go back in time and take a look at a much older version, the Hanjian. Okay, the first thing you'll probably notice is the almost complete lack of a handguard. Okay, unfortunately, we don't really have any source material to go off of as far as how these were used, because they're an ancient weapon that is so far back from the past that we just those traditions didn't survive, and so all we can really do is use our modern forms and cut intuitively with it. I mean, at some point, a bar of steel that's sharpened is just a bar of steel that's sharpened. It always kind of surprises me when people see cutting with the sword and they're surprised. It's like, it's what it's built to do. So why the surprise? But anyway, so this is one that would have been used, a couple thousand years ago, the 4,000 to 2,000 year period. These are modeled after very, very old antiques that have been collected, and they're very nice to collect. They're very nice to have. They're fun to play with forms and stuff and cutting. But the truth is, we really don't know how they were used. Not insofar as having codified source material. So, but sword, straight, two edges. So we've looked at the saber, we've looked at the sword, we've defined them. Okay, so now let's look at a couple models that break the mold. Okay, first one we're going to look at is a Song period Dao. Okay, as you can probably see without even removing the sheath, there's no curve in this Dao. Okay, it's straight. It is single edged. Okay, it's got a clipped point, which is a discussion in and of itself. Okay, but what we start seeing during this time period is the addition of the tunko, the guard, which is flared to the blade side as opposed to the back side. Okay, and that becomes a really, really, really big part of Dao from that point forward. So this is really thick, heavy blade, which can be wielded with one or two hands, and I can only surmise that it was used to beat through armor, just to cleave through armor. It's not. I don't think it was meant to be finessed or anything like that. Everything about the feel and build indicates to me that this was a hammering type motion as far as trying to break through heavy armor. So while we don't have a curve, we've got a single edge that certainly doesn't qualify as a sword. So Dao, being such an ambiguous term in Chinese grammar, just literally translating to knife of any length, any size, but it always implies that single edge. And I think that's why these type of swords keep the Dao title. So let's look at another one. This is LK Chin's Tonghing Dao, Tang Dynasty Dao, and this is where we get into what some people call proto-katanas, and you can see why. Okay, we're starting to get a longer hilt that can be grasped with the secondary hand. Okay, we've got a straight profile, single edge again, except that on these about 2.5 inches on the back side, we've got sharpness here. This is sharpened up to about where my thumb is, okay? Which means I can use this upward flicking motion, single-handed or double-handed, to get in cuts to the wrist, which open up big cut opportunities, okay? But during the Tang Dynasty, you know, this is when Japan and China, they were trading. They were trading ideas, they were trading steel, they were trading weapons, okay? This might have been where, you know, the katana started. With this Dao, you know, the suka got a bit longer. They added some curvature to it to improve the cutting power. But that's all just speculation. There's, you know, nothing definitive on that, except that we do know that China and Japan were trading, especially in steels. So this, I think, is the most interesting outlier because of this sharpened back edge, and because it's right at that point of being a hand and a half or two-handed sword that feels very much like a katana, as opposed to, you know, a single hand Dao that we know and practice today. It's a really cool weapon. It's neat to cut and play with. The geometry is just a straight triangle, purely a wedge. So it's unforgiving as far as cutting. You know, you've really got to hold your edge alignment, but it's a really fun cutter in any case, especially if you can get target thin enough in diameter that you can practice with those flicking cuts with the top part. Anyhow, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about as far as CMA, CSA, and how we classify swords and sabers into two different groups. And yet there are outliers because there are so many iterations of so many different weapons throughout Chinese history. We just have some that are outside of our need to be categorized, you know, our Western need to label and categorize, that the East didn't seem to be that concerned with. Maybe they were at the time and we just lost that stuff. Maybe not. But anyway, that's all I wanted to really show for today is you know, how we define the difference between sword and saber, and that there are outliers, you know, that don't necessarily fit in either group quite perfectly. Okay, so thank you guys. All right, we're going to test this new audio, see how it turned out. Thank you for watching. Okay, I've been looking at the polls, I've been looking at the titles that everybody wants to see, and we'll get them to you. Thank you guys.